Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Kosh.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I was telling the morning session, I could not download the free trial version because it's a university laptop, so it did not allow me. This administrator right is needed. But I have purchased your software 2 years ago for a 3 year period, but I have not used it because I'm scared to use. I don't know how to do it. But I hope I'm learning something this time.
Okay. Yeah, you do. Typically, you need administrator rights to install the software on a computer. So folks who use their office computers like me have to have those rights themselves or get somebody from OIT to do that.
Yeah, I tried today to the administrator. He tried and the meeting started. I said, okay, let's forget it. But anyway, I have it in my home computer, so I should be able to use
So
it.
this
Also,
was essentially dispersed. And why did JP Morgan do that? Because we wanted to free up our capacity to do more business.
This was a major financial innovation. Credit
Somebody
derivatives made it
has
possible for a bank to
news in the
skirt
background,
capital
right? I
requirements.
hope it's not me. And I am admitting new members as they show here on the screen. Hi, Prash. Thanks for your presentation in this morning.
No problem. It was my pleasure.
Very good. Very good.
Hi, Dr. Koch.
Hello. Oh, that's Jessica. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Hi,
heard
Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hello, Dr. Islam. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Yes.
So
s-
Jessica, can you hear me well?
yes, I can. Yes.
Very good. Let me share the screen here just as a test. Okay, I'll sharing the screen. So can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Oh, and you already started the actual meeting. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I started like 3 minutes before.
Okay.
Admit all. And now you see the screen, which is Teams, correct?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So you can see even your faces here.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I can just minimize it. Yeah, I can minimize it. And I want to get rid of this. So there's this, yeah, I can move to the bottom. Good. Let me ask you, can you all see these controls at the bottom of the screen?
The icons, like
yeah,
the
or are you
toolbar,
just, I'm sorry?
we can see the toolbar with the Teams icon, the PowerPoint icon, the
At the bottom here.
yes,
Google
we
Chrome.
can.
Yeah.
Because you're
Okay.
sharing your screen, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sharing this screen. I just
Mhm.
brought it from the top to the bottom because at the top it interferes with me switching from one tab to the other. So I'll leave it down here. Good. So yeah, I'm pretty good to go here. Let me see if there are more people. Good. So I can, if you're okay with that, I can start. And then if anybody comes in late, I will admit them. Should not be a problem. Occasionally, I will just ask you if you saw this or that, just in case I get disconnected, and then I don't know if I get disconnected. So I keep on speaking, and nobody's hearing me because I got disconnected. So I will do some checks from time to time. Just ask you, are you seeing this? Are you seeing that? And by the way, if you have questions, you can ask them anytime. It's probably better if you do that because you will make the interaction, you'll make the presentation more interactive. Otherwise, you'll be tedious because it's a long time. Also, so it's many topics to cover. Also, we're going to have maybe a couple of breaks in between. So let me start by showing you this PowerPoint slides. Okay, and pointer options, laser pointer. Let me just go back because I think someone has just, yeah, admit all. So a couple more people coming in. Okay, so I just admitted a couple of people. Laser pointer. Okay, so the title of our workshop, the second one, is Structural Equation Modeling with Partial Least Squares, Intermediate and Advanced Topics. My name is Ned Koch. I am at Texas A&M International University. If you're not from around here, we are in Laredo, Texas, right on the border with Mexico. We are one of 11, I believe 11 components of the Texas A&M University system. That's one of the two large university systems in Texas. The other one is the University of Texas system. That is even larger than our system. And then there are a bunch of other university systems in Texas that are smaller, like Texas State, University of Texas, Texas Tech. These are all university systems in Texas. Okay. So here are the topics that we're going to be covering. Talk a little bit about the Warp PLS software and related resources, SEM and measurement with error, composite-based and factor-based algorithms, multi-level analysis, using categorical variables in SEM, logistic regression, endogeneity, common method bias, and common structural variation reduction. Depending on questions and interaction, I may spend more time in one of these, and then we may not cover all of them. It's also possible and quite likely that I will cover topics that are not here. For example, I will mention what is second order analysis. I will mention something that is interesting, which is imputation of missing indicators. Sometimes you do an analysis, SEM analysis, and you're missing one indicator, meaning you have only two indicators. If you have only one, it means you are measuring a latent variable without error. But if you have two, you are assuming you're measuring it with error, but you're providing the software with too few indicators for the software to give you the best results. So in that case, you can actually impute the missing indicator, create a new indicator through logistic regression, and then include that in the analysis. So I'm going to talk about that and maybe a couple of other things that are not here. So hopefully we'll see. We'll see if I can get to all of these topics. So warpls.com, this is the website for the software. Pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about today is linked on this website. If not, it may be under the WarpLS blog. But it's most of what I'm going to talk about, if not everything, will be linked here somehow, either as an article or as a YouTube video. The user manual for the software is available as a standalone document. When you are running the software and you click on the user manual link, the software actually loads the user manual. That is a standalone PDF file, but it can also get it directly from this website. We have the blog. The blog has a number of articles, and you can access the articles via labels as well as by searching them. And you have a large number of YouTube videos linked. Right now we have well over 200,000 views. And we have several publications that are related to WarpLS and that illustrate several of the things that I'm going to be talking about here. And we have this link to model-driven data analytics. This is a website. Let me go there. So this is the website, model-driven data analytics. Let me just check to see if there are any people waiting. Okay, no one waiting. I think I saw something here.
There was one person waiting, but I admitted them, Dr. Koch.
Okay. And
Yes.
on chat, I think there was one message here, but okay. All right, nothing there. So this website, Model-Driven Data Analytics, is a website whereby you can teach model-driven data analytics, where students will do a data analytics building a model, very much like what we do with structural equation modeling. But this is different in that the data that the students will use will be company data, organizational data. And here we have a textbook, which is, you can make it available to the students free of charge. And the textbook and the materials on the website cover 6 applications. And they are all very applied. So they're all very data analytics oriented, but it uses WarpLS. And since we have 6 modules, and so if you're teaching a course that has, say, 15 weeks, you could do one application for every 2 weeks. So then you give the students more time to do the applications. And if you're teaching a 7-week course, then you can do, you can have your first week, which is a general intro to the course, and then the other weeks would be each one of these applications here, 6 applications. And the applications are actually the students downloading these data sets and doing analysis that should be identical to the analysis here on the videos, on the YouTube videos linked to the website. And there is even a report template. So I'm showing you this because you can actually teach a data analytics course pretty much without having to adopt a textbook or do anything that's beyond using this website. What I usually do when I teach my course is I create links on my course to individual elements of this website. So instead of giving the students access to this website, I link like the textbook, I link each one of the data sets and the YouTube videos and the templates, right? So this is a template for a course long report, which you may adopt or not because it may be a little bit too much in addition to all of the assignments. But this is a pretty much self-contained website that you can use to teach an entire course on data analytics. And if you teach this in a course that will cover the applications in, say, 3 weeks, the students can use the software during the trial version, right? Because the software is available on a trial basis for 90 days. So the students can use it on trial. Now, if the students happen to have installed already and used the trial version before, or have the software installed with a license, then they would have to buy another license. But other than that, they can use the trial license. What I do here in our universities, I have the university install the software on the virtual desktop, so the students can use it there, and so that doesn't make it obviates the need for the license. Okay, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. So model-driven data analytics. So SEM and measurement with error. And I'm going to talk about a few things here. And then soon after, I'm going to show you how to create data using Excel. And I will be making reference to certain elements here in this part of the presentation. So I'm going to highlight that before we go to the creating the data using Excel. I will talk about creating data using Excel, but that's not going to be a Monte Carlo simulation type of data creation. It's a simple data creation approach with Excel. And I think that's useful because sometimes you want to get data from an organization and you want to give an example of what the data that you expect to get from them. And by creating data, you can actually share your synthetic data set with them and then say, look, this is what I'm looking for. And then they will know, because often you go to an organization and they say, yeah, we have data. But then they don't know what you're expecting as a data set. So they give you this data dump that they don't even know what the rows mean, what columns mean, and so on. So creating data and explaining what the data is to organizations may make it easy for them to provide data for you. Another thing that this is useful for is if you want to teach, right? So if you want to teach the use of the software, this software or any software that does data analysis like this, like SPSS, for example, if you can create data in Excel, that is useful because you can create data in a simple way, and you should be able to analyze that data. You're not going to get precisely what you get. If to get precisely what you want, the exact path coefficients that you want, you would have to do something more complex, significantly more complex. which is a Monte Carlo simulation type of implementation, which is just too complex to do. You can ask AI to create synthetic data for you, but my experience with that is that's not as good as creating data with Excel using the simple approach that I'm going to show to you in a little bit. So this is an SEM model. And so we have 3 latent variables. We have several indicators. This is what we call mediator. These variables, one is formative, the other 3 are reflective. Formative and reflective measurement. So let's say, maybe I have a slide here. Yeah, I have a slide, so I'm going to wait a little bit. So this is a typical SEM model. Variables that are pointed at, like this one and this one, are called endogenous variables, or criterion variables, or dependent variables. Well, this is endogenous too, right? Because it's pointed by this one. Now, this one, latent variable A, is not dependent on any other variable. So no other latent variable point at it. So we call it an independent latent variable, an exogenous latent variable, or a predictor latent variable. So if you take these two, this is endogenous, and it's the criterion for this little model here with 2 latent variables. And this is the predictor of this little model. Now,
Dr. Koch,
yes.
in the previous model, in the previous slide, variable A is formative. Shouldn't the indicators point at the latent variables to be formative?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And there is debate on this. My belief, or I would argue, that in more formative measurement, the latent variable must exist before the indicators. So the causality goes from latent variable to indicators. There are those who argue that in formative measurement, the indicators cause the latent variable. And some argue that composite-based structural cohesion modeling, which is traditionally associated with PLS methods, is ideal for this situation where the indicators cause the latent variable. All of these things are open to debate. I'm going to explain to you why it's not very logical to assume that the indicators cause the latent variable. I'm going to explain that in a little bit. But the bottom line is that if you're submitting an article in the review panel, somebody in the review panel, a reviewer says, formative measurement, the indicators cause the latent variable. Since this is a debatable issue, I would not contradict the review panel. And I would even consider using PLS mode B for implementing latent variable A, which is an algorithm that assumes the indicators cause the latent variable. So I would not sacrifice a paper publication in a selective journal based on this issue. It is open to debate, but not that much. I'll explain in a little bit why.
Thank you.
So I'll get there in like 3 slides down the road. So this is a structural model, a structural equation model, right? SEM model. The SEM model has a structural model, which is made up of the latent variables. In here, and this is also referred to or also known as the inner model in the analysis. And this is essentially the theory to be tested, right? So whatever your theory is, it's expressed to the structural model. Now, notice that all the endogenous variables here, these three are endogenous, they have a structural error term, which explains the variance in the endogenous variable that is not explained by the predictors. So if you have an R squared here associated with the latent variable, and that R squared is, say, 50% or 0.5, the structural error term will explain the remainder of that unexplained variance. So that would be the other 50%. So these are structural error terms. We have to have these if we're going to create data using Excel. And by the way, with Excel, we create first the latent variables, and then we create the indicators. Okay. Okay, and here's, you have the inner model in Warp PLS with the indications of the variable types and the number of indicators used. So this is F for formative and 16 indicators. This is R for reflective and 7 indicators. And here we have the measurement model, right? So the measurement model, we have here the indicators, that we have the latent variables, they cause the indicators. And for each indicator, we have an indicator error term because the indicator is endogenous to the latent variable. So the latent variable causes the indicator. If the loading, which is the correlation between the two, is, say, 0.7, that means that the R squared on the indicator that is accounted for the latent variable is 0.49, right? Because it's 7.7 squared. So because only the latent variable causes the indicator. So this indicator error term has to explain the remainder of the variance, and that would be 0.51 in this case. So if I'm going to create indicator data, I need to have one indicator error term for each one of the indicators. We always need error terms to create data. Otherwise, the data is completely correlated with the whatever we are using to create it. And that doesn't happen in reality. So that would be the outer model shown in Warp PLS. By the way, a traditional composite-based PLS algorithms, they tend to require the inner model to be defined for the algorithm to converge. That's not the case with PLS regression, and it's not the case with the factor-based algorithms that are implemented with Warp PLS. So Warp PLS implements composite-based algorithms and factor-based algorithms. The factor-based algorithms generate results that are virtually identical to the results generated by composite-based SEM, like Amos. Okay, so
can I ask you a quick
measuring
question, Dr.
Yes.
Kopp? As you explained earlier about the direction of arrow from the independent variables or predictor variable to the indicators, if that's not the case, if they have to be in the same direction, then what actually is the difference between formative and reflective? indicators?
That's what I'm going to explain based on
Okay.
this slide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so here I have a measure, a latent variable or a latent construct, which is job satisfaction, right? Reflective measurement would be characterized by me using redundant questions in questionnaires, such as, I like my job is great, my job fulfills me, my job is wonderful, my job is very important for me, that kind of thing, right? So if forget about the important one because that would be job importance, but anything that implies job satisfaction would be used in reflective measurement. And so I would have a few of those questions to be answered on questionnaires using Likert type scales, like scales that go from 1 to 7, 1 being strongly disagree, 7 being strongly agree. That type of scale is called a Likert type scale. So that's reflective measurement, redundant questions. Formative measurement is characterized by non-redundant questions, like, I like my boss, I like my office, I like the city I work at, I like the computer I use. These are not redundant because you may like your boss, but not your office or the city you work at. So formative measurement is characterized by non-redundant questions, and reflective measurement is characterized by redundant questions. Now, in both cases, the construct job satisfaction has to exist before you create the questions, right? Because if you don't know that you're measuring in a formative way job satisfaction, then how can you come up with the questions? The questions will be like, I like whatever, or something that is nonsensical because you don't have anything in mind. So that's the reason why the latent constructs or the latent variables cause the indicators always when you use questionnaires. It is illogical to assume that questions that exist in a questionnaire will create, will cause latent variables. But that's an argument that many people make. Some people will say, well, you can create a questionnaire with a bunch of questions that you put there, but you did not think of any particular construct. And that's an argument that's used to say, oh yeah, indicators can cause latent variables. But think about it. If you have a question in a questionnaire that is, I like my dog, and the other question is, I like my wife, you have something in mind when you created those questions, right? Now, if you aggregate a question like my dog and I like my wife in the same latent variable, what you're doing is something that is just creating a sort of a designed composite that is supposed to measure something. But in that particular case, it would probably be something like, I like my non-work life. Uh, it could be something like that. But then again, one could say, well, you were thinking about non-work life when you included those questions in the questionnaire. So it's very difficult to argue that you can create questions out of nowhere, right? Not having anything in mind, and then those questions cause latent variables. Now, what you can have is analytic composites, right? So there are, for example, there are measures that we use in business research and that are aggregations of different things. And those, you could argue that in those cases, the causality is on the other way, goes the other way, right? So for example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it's an aggregation of 30 measures, which are actually based on the stock prices of 30 companies. They're mostly industrial companies. Not all of them, but most of them are industrials. And they are weighted based on their market capitalization. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average is arguably, it's an index that is not really a latent variable, but I would argue that that is an analytic composite. So it's created. You don't enter the individual elements of the Dow Jones into an analysis, an SEM analysis, and ask the software to generate an index for you. You actually calculate the index by using market capitalizations as the weights. So it's a designed item. You can have those, but they would not be, you would not enter the indicators in an SEM analysis using them. You just use them as a one indicator latent variable. Does that explain my view?
I have a follow-up question on that, especially towards reflective measurement. Your two questions or your two sentences here are like my job and my job is great. As a respondent, I may take it differently. It's like, I like my job. I like being professor. Yes, I do. My job is great. Maybe they're talking about like, working at a particular school, Texas A&M. I may not like it, right? So they go in opposite direction. Just like I like my boss, but I may not like my office. So how do you deal with that?
Well, for reflective measurement, so both reflective measurement and formative measurement, they have measurement quality criteria that you would use to assess whether you're measuring what you want to measure, right? And reflective measurement is the more development criteria. So, for example, let's say that I like my job. Let's say you have these and other questions, and one of them was not understood in the same way that the designer, the questionnaire understood, right? So that will come up in a confirmatory factor analysis as a low loading. And also you may have problems with discriminant validity if you have one indicator loading poorly on one variable, latent variable, but then more strongly on another latent variable. So there are criteria, they are called they are called reliability and validity criteria that tell you whether the reflective measurement is done properly. And also for formative measurement, the criteria are different for formative measurement. So what you look there is at weights and redundancy among indicators. So you want indicators that are not redundant with one another, otherwise you have reflective measurement, right? So if you are employing formative measurement, you want that to be true formative measurement. And you also want the indicators to be strongly associated with the latent variables, and then you look at the weights, not the loadings. So for reflective measurement, you pick up those problems by doing a confirmatory factor analysis. And for formative measurement is something a little bit different from a confirmatory factor analysis. Some of that might have been covered in the morning session. It's the part on measurement assessment. Does that answer your questions?
Yes. So if it doesn't load a particular question doesn't load, my job is great, then do you exclude that before you do further analysis and rerun the whole SEM?
You exclude it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You could reassign it, right? So if it happens to load poorly on one latent variable, but the cross-loading is high for another latent variable, then you could just reassign it to the other. Now, you may get to a situation where you have only 3 to start with, and then if you exclude one and then you have just 2, that's too little. So then what you can do is to create another indicator using logistic regression. That would be an indicator imputation approach. But yeah, you can always exclude the ones that do not load properly.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is another example. So yeah, it's essentially the same thing. So do all these cause indicators? They have to, because you create the questionnaire with the constructs in mind. But then again, as I said to you, when you write a paper, if the review panel wants you to treat a variable as if the indicators cause the latent variable, you can do that. In WarPLS, you can actually use different algorithms for different latent variables. So you don't have to sacrifice your entire study because of a methodological disagreement. But you may also run into the situation where the review panel will say, no, latent variables always cause the indicators, which is the default assumption used in covariance-based structural equation modeling, right? Using Amos, Lisrow, and so on. Now, whether indicators cause latent variables or not, you obtain weights by regressing the latent variable scores on the indicators. And this is a problem with covariance-based SEM, because in covariance-based SEM, the software does not generate the latent variable score. So you cannot regress the latent variable on the indicators. Therefore, you cannot obtain weights. You can obtain only loadings, but not weights. And that's a major weakness of covariance-based SEM, right? Because then you cannot test formative measurement without weights. So this is why in SEM in general, formative measurement is excluded. Okay. So WarPLS implements composite-based algorithms where the indicators will be aggregated to create a latent variable without a measurement residual. And it will also have factor-based algorithms. WarPLS has factor-based algorithms that take that measurement residual into consideration. And this is important because composite-based, like traditional classic PLS, is criticized in the literature of methods by excluding measurement residuals, and then that leads to distortion in path coefficients and loadings. So that is a bit of a problem. So I tend to use factor-based algorithms in my analysis. But there are some exceptions. For example, if you have a data set that has what seems to be more or less severe common method bias, composite-based algorithms tend to perform better when you have common method bias. And that's something that factor-based algorithms, the latent variables tend to be too highly correlated with one another if there is significant common method bias. So you may end up with focal linearity variance inflation factors that are too high for comfort. And then when you report that to the reviewers, some may point out that those FCVIFs are too high, etc. So you can, revert to a composite-based algorithm. And the one that performs the best with common method bias is PLS regression. It's this one here. Robust path analysis just averages the indicators. So they assign a robust path analysis is an algorithm that assigns the same weight to each one of the indicators. PLS regression does not. It assigns different weights. Now here you see the problems, right? So if you don't use a factor-based algorithms, you end up with these problems. So, and this is something that a review panel may present as a challenge if you use just composite-based algorithms. So in composite-based SEM, non-zero paths non-zero paths that exist at the population level, they are underestimated. So here with PLS regression, PLSR, the path coefficient was estimated at 0.35. And with PLSF CFM3, which is the most similar to covariance-based SEM, the same path coefficient was estimated at 0.51. So it's a lot higher. And that leads to a higher R squared in the endogenous variable to which that path points. And it leads to overall better coefficients in your analysis. And the other problem, which is more severe, is that zero paths that are zero at the population level, they are overestimated by composite-based algorithms. So in this case, the algorithm overestimated as 0.07. It was not high enough an overestimation to lead to a significant result, but it could have been significant. Whereas the factor-based algorithm estimated it closer to zero. It's not zero because of sampling error, right? So when we analyze an empirical data set with a sample size that is finite, like say 300, 500, what we're doing is assuming that that came from a population which is much larger. And because of that, because you're sampling from a larger population, you have sampling error. And sampling error creates distortions in all of the coefficients you calculate. So because of that, you never get the true population values. And this is why you have to do multiple analysis. And that thing that everybody says, more research is done and is needed, right? Because you never know what the true population values are. So you have to do a lot of empirical studies that lead to similar results to get to a point where you can say, well, this is probably what happens at the population, and that's a theory. Okay, so which algorithm is the right one, right? So let me move this thing out of the way. So which algorithm is the right one? So since you're dealing with empirical data, typically you cannot tell, right? So if empirical data is all you have, how can you tell which algorithm is the right one? And the most widely accepted answer to that question is the algorithm that gives you the best results. And among the results that you get, the indices that you get, model-wide indices, there are these two that are also used in covariance-based SEM, and they are indicator correlation matrix fit indices. And essentially, if you get lower measures, you have a better fit. So you can always say, well, this algorithm has a better fit because I have a lower SRMR or SMAR. So let me show you an example in practice. So let's say here we have PLS M, which is PLS mode A for reflective measurement, and PLS mode B for formative. That's the classic PLS approach. That's PLS M. And then you have PLS F, Reg 2. And which one is the best? Well, it's PLS F, Reg 2, because it has the best fit with the data, with the model. And that is indicated by the SRMR and the SMAR, which are lower than the two same measures for the composite-based algorithm. So that's pretty much something to keep in mind. Generally speaking, factor-based algorithms will give you better results. They will get you stronger path coefficients and higher R-squared coefficients. So generally speaking, you should use those, but sometimes they give you odd results, and that's due to excessive collinearity, which may be caused by common method bias. Composite-based algorithms, they tend to exclude variation, common variation in the model. And since common method bias is caused by common variation, that gets excluded too. So you get more reasonable results. I'll tell you, one thing that is a telltale sign of too high collinearity is path coefficients. They're too close to 1. Even greater than 1. Like, so if you have a path coefficient that is, say, 0.8 or 1.1, for example, that is a collinearity indication. It could be that the relationship is nonlinear, so collinearity is below acceptable levels, but you have like 0.8. But anything higher than 1 is an indication of collinearity, multicollinearity. Okay, this is a normal distribution. So most data is not normally distributed, but it's quasi-normally distributed. So, it conforms more or less to a normal distribution. And in a normal distribution, so you have your mean, right, which is indicated here, and then you have your standard deviation. So let's say your mean, let's say for the distribution of ages in the United States, let's say your average life expectancy, not ages, average life expectancy is 80 years of age, and your standard deviation is 20. So you're going to have 68% or around that number within ages. I'm sorry, life expectancies 60 to 100, because the standard deviation is 20, right? So 68% of your data points will be between 1 and -1 and 1 standard deviations from the mean. And then you're going to have 13% or so, a little bit more than that, in between -1 standard deviation and 2 standard deviations from the mean, and in positive as well, 2.1% above that, and so on. So as you can see, most of the variation will be here around the mean. Now, I would not exclude points that are far from the mean, even though they are unlikely, they would be outliers in the data set. I would not exclude them from the analysis because they are important in shaping the distribution and giving you the right coefficients. So path coefficients can be distorted if you remove data points from the data set. They can be distorted by some data points, but they can be distorted by removing the data points as well. Now, one interesting thing is that if you do a test, a statistical test that is like a comparison of means test, typically you're going to get statistical significance when you have 1 point, a data point. I'm sorry. Typically, you're going to get statistical significance if you're comparing two distributions when the means are one standard deviation different from one another, considering the whole data set, right? So that's interesting to keep in mind because note that if you split these various areas here, let's exclude this one, is so rare, right? This 3 standard deviations plus and minus below the mean. And so just take these here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is not 7. And in the Likert type scale, typically you have 1 to 7, right? So or 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Sometimes people say, well, you should not have an even an odd number. So 1 to 7, you would have one in the middle that is neither disagree nor agree. That would be number 4, right? 4 in the 7-point scale. Some people say, no, you should not have that one. You should have only the ones that indicate a direction, right? So no neutral point. The problem with that is that sometimes you get a mean that is a little bit, to the right here, and then you interpret that assessment as being meaningful, but it's not statistically meaningful because it has to be really one standard deviation different from the other to be meaningful. And so this is something to keep in mind. Also, keep in mind that having a scale with 100 points will not give you better granularity in the answers than 7 because of the magical number 7 rule or Miller's law. This rule essentially says that human beings cannot differentiate between 7 different possibilities or 7 different points in a scale. So if you have a scale with 100, you're not going to get more granularity. It will be just as good as having 7 plus or minus 2. So there is this is called the theory behind this cognitive chunking theory. And it's also the reason why when you have numbers that cannot be associated with one another, you have to memorize them individually. Usually you get no more than 7, like a phone number, right? No more than 7 numbers that cannot be memorized together. So in other words, if they cannot be aggregated, it has to be 7, otherwise people will not remember them quickly after seeing them. So that's the magical number 7 rule. So this is the reason why Likert type scales, they tend to have 7 points. Okay, so let me go and talk about data creation using Excel, because that's useful. A very useful thing. So let me show you this. Can you all see this folder here on the screen? 2026 Word PLS Workshop. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes,
good.
we can.
Yeah, only one person answering is enough. I was wondering if the wonderful system that we have just disconnected us, but no, good. So what I will do is I have subfolders that I will use for this presentation. What I will do is I will zip this folder and then pass it on to Amy Palacios and ask her to send all of this to you. So she'll send you, so you have everything that I'm using for this presentation, including those PowerPoint slides. Okay? I hope that's useful to you. So, and by the way, in these folders, I have these temp files. The reason I create them is because I may change the original file by mistake. And then you have the original file is really what matters. The temp files are the ones that I'm showing here. And I will actually make some changes to them anyways. So creating data with Excel. So I actually have created already some sheets here, 2 sheets with formulas. But let me show you the essence of what I'm doing here in real time. So let's say a model where I have 2 predictor latent variables, T and M. That could be technology use and a management style, so I say democratic management, use of a technology like Workday or any technology that people use in a company. And then I have performance. And my assumption is that these predictors influence performance. So they cause performance. And because these are latent variables and this is endogenous, right? P is endogenous. I need to have a structural error term. So I'm going to call it E. And how do I create? So I will have these variables, these 3, created as random variables because they are independent from one another, including the error term. The structural error term is independent from any variable in the model, and so are the independent predictors of P. P is the only dependent one. So I will create them as random, and I will create them on a scale. So I'll use rand between, this function in Excel, and I'll enter 1 to 7. That would mimic a Likert type scale. And let me create just 10 so you can see the values on the screen. So you can see these are random values. And now I'll do the same for these 2 variables. So now I just wanted 10. So delete these 2. So these are random variables. And since they are all on 1 to 7 scale, I will create my dependent variable as a weighted aggregation of these 3 other variables. And since I want this to be on the same scale, 1 to 7, it will have to be weighted, right? So let's say I will use 0.2 times T plus 0.25 times, no, let me use 0.3 times M. And then since this is a weighted aggregation, the error term is the remainder. So it's 0.2, 0.3, that's 0.5. So then the error term becomes 0.5 times that error term. So that gives me values on that scale 1 to 7. They are fractional, right? Because I'm not using a formula here. I could use round up or round down, and then I would get like 1 to 7 integers. So then it would be exactly like the Likert type scale answers. And this assumes that I have one indicator, right, per variable. But this is a very simple way of creating data that then I can input into WarPLS and then test. Now, by the way, with this data creation, every time I press F9, it recalculates everything. So I will do this now. So F9 should be recalculating. Oh yeah, it just did. So every time I press F9, the values change. And as you can see, they change a lot because they changed it in a way that would change a lot the coefficients, path coefficients, because the sample size is so small that I have a lot of sampling error. So anyways, I created more comprehensive data sets here, and I created some things here formulas that give you a better indication of what will happen when I analyze this data using WarPLS. So in this sheet here, ModF, I have a moderating variable, which is typically what I would have with moderation. And this is a bit hard to do with, if you ask an AI tool to do this for you, the AI tool may come up with something that is what you were expecting. It may not. So this is more under your control. So I did the same thing, but in this case, I created 300 rows of data. So 300. And what I have here are the weights that I used. And because this is P here is a weighted aggregation of TM, and this one, this is a moderating, this is an interaction link. The correlations between these variables and P, they will be different. And by the way, because of sampling error, when I analyze this data with WarPLS, the path coefficients will not be the same as the correlations because they're not the same, but even the correlations will be different because of sampling error. Different algorithms treat sampling error in different ways. But the magnitudes will be similar to what you're seeing on the screen here. So this is what I have for the latent variables. Now this one is a moderating link. So I'm assuming that what happens here is that M moderates the relationship between T and P. And so this is an interaction effect. And for this one, I actually created a different formula in which I normalized the value multiplied by 7 divided by 49 to get it on 1 to 7 scale. And for good measure, I wrapped all of this into the median function, which ensures that the values are in between 1 and 7. The median function is probably not designed for this purpose, but Google Gemini told me that I could use it for this, and it works. So the median function, I use it here just to make sure that none of the values here go outside 1 and 7. And the 49 max here is because that's the max value of the product, right? Since I have all of these variables, they are on 1 to 7 and they're random, the max product will be 7 times 7, which is 49. So that's the normalization. Now, one thing you're going to notice when we analyze this data with Excel, with WarPLS, is that this correlation between the interaction term and P, which will be a moderating link, will be suppressed. The reason for that is that this will be calculated controlling for T and M. So this interaction effect contains variation that is also in T and M. And because of that, it will be suppressed as an interaction term. So the interaction term path coefficient for that, which will be the moderating effect, is calculated controlling for the effects of T and M, which is an interesting thing. Now, I have another data set that I created, which is more like what I refer to and other people refer to as a latent growth effect. So notice that here, the interaction effect includes a variable O that I will not include in the model. That is not in the model per se. So my model contains the latent variables P, T, and M. O is not part of the model. So, but O influences the effect of T on P, but it's not in the model. So it's a latent type of moderating effect. And this is often, it's not even tested in structural equation modeling, but it's now very widely used in a difference in differences analysis. But in difference in differences analysis, this actually is a categorical variable. So I hope I can illustrate this for you without complicating things too much in this presentation. But then again, this presentation is on advanced topics. So these are more complex topics. So now let me talk about the indicators, right? So I also created indicators for one of the latent variables. So I used P. I created for P. And here's the thing, right? So if I'm going to create indicators for P, P has to exist before I created the indicators. So I need to create the structural model first to create the measurement model next in my synthetic data set. So for each one of the indicators, what I use is the latent variable, which is P, and the error term associated with that indicator, which is independent. So it's just a random variable. And I use the same approach, which is an aggregation of a weighted aggregation of these two variables. And since I want this to be on a scale from 1 to 7, I have to use a weight, and then the weight for the error term is the remainder. So for example, for P1, the weight for P is 0.6. The weight for the error term is 0.4 then. And that leads to different correlations. The correlations are more like the magnitudes of the loadings. Now, again, as I said, there are distortions when you use composite-based algorithms. The loadings are overestimated. So these would be more in the neighborhood of 0.8 something. And for factor-based, they would be more around 0.7. So this is how we create a data set. So, and let me do the F9 so you see when I hit on F9, I change the results. And you see the correlations, they change too. The weights I keep the same, but the correlations change a lot. And so you see 0.43, 0.36, 0.38, 0.39, that's 34, 0.44, 0.39, and the weights are the same. So why do they vary so much each time I press F9? It's because of sampling error. The sample size is only 300. So each time I do a resampling, this leads to changes in the correlations, which are parameters of the model. So when I refer to parameters of the model, I'm referring to all of the coefficients that are calculated for the model: loadings, weights, path coefficients, R-squared coefficients, and so on. So let me input this data into PLS. And before I do that, what I'll do is I will copy all of this into a sheet, but I'll copy them as values, not to get the formulas. And so I will just delete this part here. And then, and by the way, I'm not going to. So here's a situation that I don't want to copy this one into the data set. I want the software to just calculate the moderating effects. So this is often the situation people are into. They get into the situation. Let me also add something here. Let's say I collected this data from 3 countries: Brazil. So I'm gonna go close to 100. So I collected 100 from Brazil. Then another 100 from the USA. Or close to 100. And then the remainder from, let's say, Spain. So let's say you get a data set like this, where you don't want to include this variable, and you want to separate this one from the data entry, because you can only enter a categorical variable at a time. So only one at a time. So what you do is you create another sheet. In this case, I'll create 2 other sheets here. So I'll create one here and then another one. In this one, I can call it numeric data. And the other one, I'll call it cat data for categorical. In the numeric data, I will delete this column because I don't want it. I will read the indicators just for illustration purposes. I don't want this one. I'll delete. And for the categorical data, I'll just leave that categorical variable. Now, here for the numeric data, one thing that you should know is that you can have empty cells. You can have one empty cell here and there. Okay, you can have missing data. You know, this missing data that I'm adding will distort the results a little bit, but not by much, because I'm not deleting from the indicators, just to illustrate this. But you should not have missing data at the end, because the software may interpret that as just a whole row missing, especially if you read data from the clipboard, as I'm going to do now. So I'm not going to read this data from the Excel file. I will read it from the clipboard. So I will copy this, Control C. I'll go to Warp PLS. I have a file here. I'll just create a new project file. So I will create a new project file, and I'll create it outside that area that I was using before. So for data creation, yeah, I'll use this one. Temps01. So I'll create that project file. Now I'm going to read from clipboard, and then I'll just read that numeric data that was there on the clipboard. So the software will impute the values that are missing. They will show here as NAM, not a number, and those are missing cells. If I had categorical data in cells here, as long as I don't have too many, the software would just treat that as missing data. Okay, and then I read my data, and then I'll go to step 3. And now the software imputed the data. And the software standardized the data. One reason why the software standardizes data is because this makes the software have more statistical efficiency, because the software has more computational efficiency. So it makes the analysis more computationally efficient, which leads to a higher statistical efficiency, which is a mathematical statistics term that essentially means that my analysis will reach the population values, the true values, with a lower sample. That's statistical efficiency. This is why I do the standardization. Some people think that standardizing data helps with deal with non-normal data. It doesn't. Non-normal data continue being non-normal. We deal with non-normal data through other things, but not standardization. Standardization does not change the distribution of the data. It does make the data easier to process computationally. Now, I'm going to read also that categorical data. Now, with the categorical data, I have to read one column at a time. So if we had 2 categorical data entry points, the columns, we would have to read them each separately. And with categorical data, you cannot have missing data. So if you have missing data like this missing here, particularly if you have it at the end, if you have missing data here at the end, at the final row, the software will tell you that your categorical variable, your label variable, does not have the same name number of rows as your numeric data, and that will be an error. So you have to have the same number of rows. Now, and you cannot have missing data because the software will not know what to impute there, and may actually treat the column as ending here. So how do you impute categorical data? Well, you do a nearest imputation. So what you do is the top one, you repeat here. So if you have several missing, like this, well, it's going to be always the closest at the top, so it'll be the same for all of those missing ones. So that's the imputation you need to employ for categorical data. And then to read it into WordPLS, what you do is...
Dr. Koch, what
yes.
if it's just right between the next country and the previous country, right before you start USA and right?
Yeah, you could use the bottom one, but I recommend you use the top.
Okay.
The top one.
Thank you.
So it's a simple, it's probably not going to make a big difference, right? Missing data distorts the results. And whether you do the top or the bottom, the nearest is not going to make a big difference. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go to modify and add data labels from clipboard. Then you click OK. And here you have to follow these instructions. So data labels cannot be empty cells. The cells cannot be empty. They cannot contain spaces. They cannot contain only numbers. And they must be combinations of letters or of letters and numbers. So I'll click OK. And then I will. Then let me now create my model. And initially I'll use only the, well, let me show you the data label that I imputed. So if you go to data, view or save data labels, now you can see that data label. And you can also see the data by going to data, view or save, raw indicator data. You can even see the missing data as NAN. So now let me create a model. And again, I should get significant path coefficients. I'll name the variables as the columns. So P, let's say that's job performance. T, it's one of the predictors. M, one of the predictors. I read the E by mistake. I should not have read the error terms. No problem. I'm not going to use them in the analysis. The error terms, the software assumes they exist, right? So the software does not need you to read error terms to conduct the analysis. So I will do this. So create the links. Now here, I usually, in the settings, the default settings are PLS regression, which is a composite based, and warp3, which is a nonlinear algorithm that identifies and models relationships that are S-curve life. Warp 2 is J-curve life. I usually start with linear because this is the easiest to interpret. And moreover, I think that nonlinear relationships should be set link by link based on theory. So you should theorize linear relationships, but the software allows you to test all the relationships as nonlinear. And in some cases, you would just the danger with doing that is that the software will model linear relationships as nonlinear by modeling error as parts of the relationship, which would not be correct. Okay, so now I'll do my analysis. And you see, I got results that I don't remember. Let me see what I had originally. But then again, those change because F9 makes them both to get recalculated. But the correlations, the path coefficients are close in value to the correlations. So that's it, pretty much what you get. Now, let's include the moderating link here. So let me go to define SEM model, moderating link option, create moderating relationship. And again, what I had was M moderating the relationship between T and P. And then let's calculate that. So I have a significant moderation, but as you recall, I said it's suppressed, right? So the correlation was more in the neighborhood of 4 point something, 0.4 something, so almost 0.5. So why do I have 0.14? The reason is that this link is actually treated by the software, by the equations, as an interaction effect that actually controls for TMP. And this interaction link variable, it has variation, incorporates variation from TNP. This is why the moderating link here is kind of suppressed. And this is common actually in moderating links. They tend to be suppressed, even though when you look at the graph. So let's go to view, plot linear and nonlinear relationships among latent variables. So when you click here, so this is if you click on this cell, you're going to get the graph for the moderating relationship. And then here you have several graphs. The one that is usually shown first is the Rocky 3D graph for moderating effect. So you can clearly see the moderating relationship here, right? So I will rotate this to the left a little bit to make it clearer. And by the way, I'm going to show the graph with unstandardized scales. So you can see the scales going from 1 to 7. This one is not 1 to 7 because it's calculated based on these two. So it's a shorter range, but you can clearly see the moderating link here. So as the moderating variable goes from 1 to 7, the relationship between T and P goes from flat to increasingly more inclined all the way here. So when you get to 7, it's a very inclined relationship. And so that's what characterizes a moderating relationship. So if you think about it, the coefficient that I got there, the point the 0.14 coefficient actually underestimates what I see here in the graph. But that's common with moderating relationships. Now you can view moderating relationships in different ways. One that is popular is this focus graph. So the focus graph shows values for low and high M. And by the way, you can change this legend here. You can just go to settings. And for the low M, you can have something like anything. Low moderation and high moderation, or whatever you want. You can say, so you can customize your graph. You can customize the titles here. You can customize everything in this graph. Now, the default option for the split here is 0.5, so it's 50%. This means that low moderation is 50% of your data set to the left, right? So imagine your data set ordered by the moderating variable. So the 50% on the left is what this inclination refers to, and the 50% to the right is what this inclination refers to. So you can see the moderation here. The inclination changes, right, from low to high. Now, if you change the split, you may be able to illustrate this more clearly. So if I do a 20% to the left split, it becomes more meaningful, right? So you can see a bigger change in inclination. And that's because moderating effects, they're not really best represented by 2D graphs like this. They're dynamic, right? So the best representation is truly that 3D representation, but sometimes the 3D representation is messy. So you go with the representation that is best for you. Just to illustrate the split here, if I use this option with two graphs with data points, you can see the effect of the split, right? So if I change the split to 80, you're going to have more points showing on the left here, because 80% of the points will be on the left. So, and then this is 20% of the points, and so on. So that allows me already to illustrate some other things that were part of the topics. Now, since I have that variable country, let me illustrate what a multi-level analysis is, right? So let's say I collected my data. Oh, first let me show you what using the indicators would do. I should get similar results using the indicators instead of using the latent variable column, because I created the indicators based on that column P. So I'm going to change my latent variable, and instead of using that column P, I'll use the indicators. Not the errors. I entered the errors here by mistake. So ignore that. So, okay, so I redo my analysis. So you got similar results, but now with the variable measured through indicators. Notice that the path coefficients are a little bit lower. If I switch the algorithm that I'm using to a factor-based algorithm, let me use this one here. They are all described in the user manual. This is a particularly good one. These two here, Reg 1 and Reg 2. Let me use Reg 1. So if I use Reg 1, the analysis gets redone. So you see that the coefficients are higher, and in fact, more in line with the actual ones on the data set. So that's the distortion I was referring to before. Composite-based algorithms, they tend to suppress actual effects. And the moderating link became a little larger as well. So now, what happens with factor-based algorithms, though, is that if you look at the loadings, they tend to be more in line with the actual loadings, right? So more are, oh no, this one is, Rec 2 is more in line with the composite loadings. So they're not suppressed. But if I had used CFM3, which is more like CB SEM, the loadings would be more around 0.7. So the path coefficients would be about the same, but the loadings would be, one would argue, more in line with the true values. And with a composite-based algorithm, there will be suppression. So if I go back to, let me use PLS mode M. This is the mode A. So if I look at the path coefficients, again, smaller than factor-based, but the loadings are more like the ones calculated by Rec 2, right? So they are, some would argue that they are overestimated. Others would say, no, empirical data is always composite-based. So it depends on the review panel. The bottom line is that if you have results, they're not going to be so changed by the analysis algorithm that you would want to sacrifice a publication, because essentially you're going to be proving or disproving your theory one way or another. So I would not fight with the review panel if they say, oh no, formative measurement, use a formative algorithm, and that's what you should use. That's fine. You can use a formative algorithm. By the way, if I wanted to model one of the variables as formative, like say M, let's say I wanted to treat M as formative. And just for good measure, I'm going to make that, I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to set it as formative. Now, with that mode M, what will happen is that PLS, the software, PLS, will treat this variable differently, and we'll use PLS mode B, which is then treating the variable as formative. And you see the results are a little bit different. And this is now being treated as formative. Okay, there was no difference because in this case, I have not used multiple indicators. So it makes no difference whether I use formative mode or reflective. But if I had set a variable that is measured through multiple indicators and is formative, then it would change the results. But I can actually do an analysis where even individual variables will be treated in different ways. But in order to do that, I have to do the analysis in 2 stages. So what I can do is I do the analysis, then I go to modify, and then I add all latent variable scores as new standardized indicators. And then I do another analysis where I use the latent variable scores instead of the indicators. This allows me to do multiple to use multiple algorithms with different latent variables in the analysis. Now, I wanted to illustrate something. Let me just change that back. I'll change it to reflective. Now, since I have only one indicator here, it doesn't make any difference. So reflective and formative, they are only meaningful if I have more than one indicator used in the analysis. Now, let me show you what a multi-level analysis is. So let's say that I collected data from multiple countries. A multi-level analysis allows you to control for the possible effect that collecting data from different countries would have on the results of the analysis. So that's a multi-level control. So what you would have to do is this. So the basic idea is that because you collected data from multiple countries, that will be another independent variable here that will actually break the assumption of independence of these 2 independent variables in the model. So you would have to create, based on that categorical variable, another variable that you would assume is actually a predictor that is here, pointing at these 2. And then you want to create an instrumental variable to account for possible endogeneity caused by that instrumental variable. So in fact, you don't even need to add that to the model, but you need to control for that because that variable will not point directly at, since the variable is not in the model, it will not point directly to P. So to control for that, you have to create it as an instrumental variable and make it point at P. And that will make this a multi-level analysis with a multi-level control. So I will do that. So, and by the way, this is not a multi-group analysis, what I'm going to do now. Multi-level analysis is not a multi-group analysis. A multi-group analysis would be me going to explore and do a explore multi-group analysis, and then choose a label, the label, and then the label would be country. And then I would choose one of the analysis methods. Constrained latent growth is the best. And I will do this analysis, and then the software will give me coefficients that would compare each one of the groups, each group pair by pair, right? So here I have the individual analysis for each one of the countries. And as you can see, they are kind of similar to one another. So this would be a multi-group analysis, and then they would be compared but for each pair of countries. And if these values here are too small to be significant, then you would conclude that there is no country effect. It does look that they are a bit. Let me see, these are p-values. I would use the two-tailed. So yeah, that they're not, this one is, so there is one here that looks like a bit, yeah, a bit close to significance. Yeah, it would be significant at 0.05. For the other, no. So there is a bit of a difference here between Brazil and Spain. Well, let's see if that, but this would be a multi-group analysis. Then you would conclude that the effect for that particular path coefficient would be stronger for Brazil than for Spain, and that difference would be significant. So you see, for Spain, the path coefficient was 0.221, and for Brazil, it was 0.463, which is interesting because I entered the names of the countries there just almost randomly, right? So I didn't really think that there was any relationship, that I was introducing any relationship, but this may also be sampling error that I have here. But this is a multi-group analysis, and in fact, I would not even recommend that you do a multi-group analysis this way. I would suggest you do it differently. But first, let me show you how you would do a multi-level control. So here, what you want to control is for these effects, considering the possible influence of the collection of the data from 3 different countries. So what I would do is I will go to Explore, Categorical, Numeric Categorical Conversion. I would go to Categorical to Numeric. I would choose Country, and I would choose my anchor variables, and those would be M and T, because I am assuming that country may influence M and T, and that influence will cause endogeneity in my analysis. So I would choose M and T. Now, the sign will be based on the correlations. And since the correlations between T and P, but since they are positively correlated with P, I can assume that the signs that I should use should be P, because they're very likely positively correlated with one another. I know that they are, but you can always check that directly. So I will use the anchors M and T. Both correlation signs will be positive, and I'll hit yes. And then I will go to my analysis, and I will create a new latent variable, which I will call I, which is an instrumental variable. And then I'll use that C2N country. And I'll create a direct link. Now, interestingly, since I had a bit of an effect there, in the multi-group analysis, maybe I will have something of an effect here. So we'll see. Yeah, it's small, right? So 0.03 is a small effect. So if this was much higher, what would happen is that these would decrease, right? Because whenever you have multiple variables pointing at one variable, they control for one another's effects. And so a large effect here would mean that these path coefficients were overestimated. And they were overestimated because my structural error term was correlated with the predictors. In other words, I had endogeneity here induced by the multiple levels of data collection, but it's very minor. In any event, I'm doing what I should be doing because even though it's a very small effect, I should control for it. And I can report in papers that I'm controlling for that possible multi-level influence. So that's how you do a multi-level control. Now, I will do, there was another thing I wanted to mention that is important, which is this. Let's say that you're collecting data and you're collecting data from different years. So let's say you have year. So let's say you collected some data in 2000. Let me copy that. So you collected some data in 2000, year 2000. Then you collected some data in, no, not 2000, 2001. And then you have some data, the remainder of the data was collected in a different year, 2002. So you collected, let's say you collected data at different years, right? So you collected data from different countries and on different years. So you should not read this as a numeric variable, because if you read this as a numeric variable and then control for a year, you're going to be controlling for the passage of time, which is not what you want to control for. You probably collected data in multiple years to increase your data set, right? This is why we collect panel data. This is called panel data. We collect data from multiple years because we want to increase our data set, but the size of our data set. But I should not control for the passage of time, because that particular, what I want to control for is the influence of collecting data in that year compared to collecting data in other years on my results. So in order to do that properly, what I have to do is to create a categorical variable that will essentially be, I'll use the function concatenate, and then I'll concatenate y in that other, in that variable that I have there, b2. And that will create actually a column of labels, right? So now I'll have a categorical column. Yeah. So I have categories for the year. So I have data collected in different years. And then what I will do is I will read that into the data set, add labels from clipboard. And then I'll do the same thing that I did before. So I'll go to Explore, categorical to numeric categorical conversion. And by the way, I forgot to do one thing. When you do a multi-level control, you should choose the option variation diffusion, because you're controlling for variation that is being diffused in the data set. It won't make a big difference, but that's the option you should choose. So M and T. And then you create yes. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. The variable is year. So I want to use year. And then, yeah, M and T. So click on yes. That's the variable. That's the indicator that I want to use for my instrumental variable. I'll go to define a SEM model, create latent variable, another instrumental variable, IP2. And that would be for year. In fact, I could name it in relation to the label variable. And I'll do the same with that other one. So that's for country. So I'll do instrumental with respect to country. And then I will create a direct link. So this is another instrumental variable. So when I collect panel data, that's what I should do. And if you do this, if you report this to the review panel, they will be impressed. If they are methodological experts, there is usually at least one in the data sets when you have SEM analysis of the data, numeric data sets. And so they will be impressed with this type of analysis. Now, let me go to, so I already illustrated several things, but I wanted to talk about paper writing. So is it okay if I tell you how to actually write a paper with these results that we're getting? Because I think this is important, because you get so many results from PLS that I think it's important for me to talk about this now. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Now, we are at 4 already. So I've been talking for 2 hours. I'm surprised. But I can continue, or we can have a break. I am fine, but if you want to have a break, we can have a break.
2 minutes
Would
quick
you
break would be great.
Sorry?
2 minutes quick break would be great.
So, okay, so let's have a 5-minute break then.
Thank you.
So we'll come back online at 4:05 then. I'll see you back in a little bit. I'll just leave the screen like this.
Dr. Koch,
Yes, I'm here.
I have a quick question about the control variables. Like in regressions, when we do capital market research in accounting and finance, we use a lot of control variables. Similarly, can we use as many control variables here, like gender, country of origin,
Yes.
distance from work, and so on and so forth? It doesn't affect the model?
Yes, you would include control variables as these right here on this. I usually include them on the right side here so that I know that they're control for my own purposes. But yeah, you can have control variables, and they would be control variables like these instrumental variables here. So you could have, if it is individuals, you could typically, demographic variables would be control variables like age, gender, that type of thing. For gender, you don't have to use categorical to numeric conversion if you have only two genders, right? So whenever you have only two categories, 0 and 1 is fine.
Okay.
But when you have more than two, then you need to use categorical to numeric conversion. And that's a very powerful feature of this software, categorical to numeric conversion. So I'm going to illustrate that in a little bit. But yeah, you can include control variables in the model.
And they will not weaken the relationship between other variables?
It depends, right? They may, if let's say this data was collected from individuals. Let's say this is job performance, this is user technology, and this is degree of use of a management technique, say empathetic management, that facilitates the use of technology. And let's say that the use of technology is correlated with age. Older people use technology more than younger people. You can actually have a significant suppression of this path coefficient here because of that control. And that's why you do controls. You control for effects that could alter your path coefficients because you are assuming that those controls could do that. So those control variables are important in that respect. So in other words, you want to test your theory, which is this part of the model here that I'm circling. You want to test your theory controlling for certain effects. So you want to control for multi-level effects, and you want to control for other, in the case of individual data, demographic factors, right? If you're collecting group data, group characteristics. If you're collecting data at the country level, country characteristics, important country characteristics. If you're analyzing data at the company level, company characteristics, and so on. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Koch,
Yeah.
I have a question too, but I don't know if you, can I ask right now or should?
Sure.
Yes, this is with respect to data collection. I mean, I know we can use surveys, but nowadays there is a popular way to collect data through platforms such as Amazon Mechanical Turk. I wonder if you have used Amazon Mechanical Turk. What are your thoughts? I mean, because I mean, collecting data is very, very important. So have you had any experience with Amazon Mechanical Turk or
Yes.
platforms like those?
Yeah, and Qualtrics, right? Qualtrics sometimes
Right.
uses other tools like Amazon Mechanical Turk. So yes, these are they are becoming the standard And in fact, there are studies that suggest that they are the better tools to use as opposed to doing surveys by contacting people online and asking them to answer. The reason for this is that these platforms, they arguably do some quality control for you that can help exclude data that is not good. And even in some cases, mitigate common method bias. So no, there are several studies that suggest that collecting data using Qualtrics and other tools like those is a good idea. Now, the downside is the cost, right? So, but I actually think that if you have the funds, let's say you have a grant or you really want to invest $10,000 of your hard-earned money to build a data set with, say, 2,000 answers, and that data set is unique, you may be able to publish 10 papers based on that data set, as long as you have enough variables there. And because it is unique to you, you're the only one who has the data set, you have an upper hand for its publication, right? Because if you use public data sets, that they're, you say, CompuStat, words, components of the words database, and other data sets that are publicly available, very likely there will be one person in the review panel that will say, well, this has been done already, right? This data has been analyzed, so this study does not bring in any new insights. And I'm referring to submissions to selective journals, right? In the ABDC list, which is the list that we use here in our university, many other universities, the ABDC list, I'm talking about journals that would be classified as A star or A in that list. So you have a challenge there from a methodological perspective. You have a challenge there, and I think you can overcome that challenge using a tool like Qualtrics, which may allow you to actually build a data set that is quite unique and that allows you to write 10 good papers. And 10 papers is enough for tenure, right? 20 papers is full professorship. So in very good journals, that's what you would have in many places. Go ahead, Ruth.
Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Koch. I have a question related to the data collection, what you're talking about, investing that money. But there are some journals that they are asking you for the data set in advance, like when you submit the manuscript. And I mean, for me, I don't like it because I feel like they are going to steal my data. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know if you have faced that. I mean, it's not related necessarily to PLS, but it's related to what you are just answering.
Yeah, I think that is not a major risk because unless you really don't trust the journal, but you can provide the data set and say, I do not give you permission to share this with anyone. Now, they ask, one of the reasons they ask is to check if there is any evidence of data fabrication, right? So they want to check to see if the data set is legit. There are ways in which you can check whether the data set is synthetic or if there is any tampering. Now, with journals, I don't think that's a big risk, but not all journals do that. And if you don't like it, you will probably have some options. But the biggest risk is between us here. If you build a data set using Qualtrics and you use, say, university funds, anyone from the public may make an open records request for that data set. And eventually you're going to have to produce. And they can use it. In fact, there are instances of researchers who get data sets collected by people in other universities and they publish. They basically say, we got this through an open records and we're publishing it. So that's the bigger risk, open records requests.
But that would be only if we use funding from the university. But if we
Yeah.
use our own money, which that's what we do, well, in my particular case, so if they request it, I could send it. You know, I don't have a problem they request it after they are doing the review, but I just get very um, hesitant to do it when they ask for the data set up front because I don't know if it's going to go through the first round, you know, and you're already
Right.
asking me for something like the most important part and the most expensive part. So yeah, there we have options. I have options. I go to another journal, but you know, it's just just to get your point of view and well, thank you.
Yeah, generally speaking, we are in a system where we need to publish in selective journals, right? And everywhere. So there's competition for publication in those journals. So I would always avoid doing things that would lead to a no right away because it's so difficult. It's getting more and more difficult to publish in selective journals. So in fact, this is the whole point of this presentation, right? It's equipping you with the knowledge that allows you to really publish in selective journals, which is not only the methodological part, but also the rest, which is what I was going to talk about with the paper structure. But anyways, okay, so any other questions on this?
Thank you.
Very good. So let me talk a lot about paper building. So, well, first of all, and this is available, I'm going to send you this, but this is also available from warpls.com. So I don't recommend that you create diagrams that you include screenshots of WordPLS in papers, unless they are tutorials on how to use WordPLS. If they are empirical papers, I recommend that you manually build the diagrams. And you can use these PowerPoint slides that I pre-created here because you have all the symbols, right? So I recommend something like this. This would be for a study. And you have here the control variables, the multi-level variables. You have the hypothesis shown here. Hypothesis that you cannot show here, like this one, age 9, that refers to a total effect of empathetic management on job performance that would be shown separately. Oh, this hypothesis that this total effect is stronger than this other total effect. So that's a different way of hypothesizing. But I suggest a diagram at a minimum, a diagram that shows your hypothesis, your model. In another diagram, very similar to the previous one with the results. This seems to be well perceived by review panels in general. Now, the paper structure, right? So how to write a paper using WAR PLS for the analysis. So I strongly recommend you write in this way. So navigation pane. So you see the headings on the left. Can you all see this, or is it too small for you to see? Can you see the paper?
I can see them.
Okay.
Yes.
So I strongly recommend you use this. You can even use this this skeleton paper that I will send you, that is shown here on the screen. So just have the basic skeleton here: paper title, abstract, and then a little description in yellow that you're gonna fill in later on. And then same thing for intro, research background and hypothesis, just something, just basically placeholders. And then write first this research method, validation of measurement model, data analysis and results. Write these sections first. And then the discussion, just put the table with a summary of whether your results support or not the hypothesis. I'm saying this because if you write the paper linearly, start with the introduction, then research background and hypothesis, what will happen is that your paper will be too large. And you should be aiming for papers that will, at the submission point, have around 6,000 words. If you submit a paper with 8,000 words, I can almost guarantee to you that it will be more likely to be rejected. Because review panels in selective journals, they want you to do things. So they want you to do more, and often in multiple rounds. So if you start with 8, you may get bigger and bigger, and then you may end up with a rejection in between. Whereas if you submit as more of a minimalist paper, but good enough, if you get a revise and resubmit, then you bend over backwards to fulfill the requests of the review panel. And that increases your chances of getting the paper accepted. So, and you can actually use this template that I'm going to send you as a model, right? You can even ask AI to paraphrase these things. Of course, they will all change because you're going to have different descriptions. But say, when the data description under research methods, you don't have to have a whole lot more than what you have here. You could, if the review panel asks. But if you start adding more things than what you have here, you're going to have a very large paper. Moreover, when you write the research background and the hypothesis, it will be much more focused if you already have the results reported. So now on the results, at a minimum, I would report for validation of the measurement model, I would report the loadings and cross loadings. So you have loadings and cross loadings here. And by the way, when I include the results, I typically copy them directly from WordPLS. So for example, combine loadings and cross loadings. I just come here and then I copy whatever I want to copy. And then, so I just did a Control-C here. And then I go wherever I want to include that. Let's say I want to include here. And then I go to the option paste special, unformatted text. And then, so I have that unformatted text here. Then what I do is I go to insert table, and then I use convert text to table. And then I add, I have this here, and then I reformat things manually. So, for example, I will want to change. So I want to change, if I have like line spacing, I don't want, I want a single, I don't want this any special treatment. I may want the table to auto-fit the contents. I will certainly want to have one more column here. So I'll insert column to the left. I'll insert rows above, and then I will enter whatever I want to enter, because you may want to use things here that are different from what you have there. So you have to, I'll reformat it again. Nothing special. So for example, you may want to use names for the latent variables that are different from what you have in WAR PLS, and you don't want to change anything on WAR PLS. So if you have A, B, and C, and you have different names for the indicators, you just list them as A1, A2, A3. And then the other, you have only one indicator, right? So maybe you just repeat, or you just have only one indicator. But that's how I enter the results. And it seems to be a lot faster than asking WarpLS to generate the Excel file with results. So I just do it this way. But at a minimum, loadings and cross loadings, correlations among latent variables and square roots for AVEs. Sometimes I add a discussion on the HTMT ratios, which are available from WarpLS. So you can get the HTMT and HTMT2 ratios for discriminant validity. They are available here, additional coefficients and indices. So discriminant validity coefficients, extended set. So here you're gonna have, again, loadings, cross loadings, etc. And then you have the HTMT ratios. And yeah, there's nothing to report here on the HTMT ratios because there is no issue. There's only one variable that is measured through indicators. But if you had the three variables measured through indicators, you would have the ratios. So what else? I would also report, these LV coefficients. And for first order LVs, because you could have a second order analysis. So if you have, then you would report the first order in an appendix, and then you would report the main results here. So I would report composite reliability, Cronbach's alpha, focal linearity VIFs, and the tests of normality, Yaki beta and robust Yaki beta. But the main message here is in the results, right? The results, I would report these. These seem to be very well received. So these are model fit results, and these are selected that are causality assessment indices. So these tend to be well received. and the results with respect to the hypothesis. But the main message here that I'm trying to convey is write papers with the results first, and then you write the rest. And by the way, I would also recommend that maybe before this section, research background and hypothesis, you have an extra section here that would be theoretical background. So theoretical background or theoretical foundation, something like that. And one thing that I have been using AI for is I give AI all of the hypotheses, and then I ask AI to give me theories that are associated with the hypothesis. Because here in this section, you're going to talk about past empirical research, but you have to tie the hypothesis to the theories. Otherwise, you're not going to make it to very selective journals. And here you could have one or two theories. So you can ask AI to give you theories that are very good in terms of their relationship with the hypothesis. And then what you ask AI to give you are key publications on those theories. And then what you end up getting from AI is actually the names of when AI mentioned the theories, you go to Google Scholar and you find the names of the developers of the theories and of people that cited them, which are often colleagues or students. And that really helps because in the review panel, you're going to probably have those people or people who are familiar with them reviewing your paper. So now don't ask AI to give you references because that's AI hallucinates a lot of references, as you probably know already. So in fact, I don't like AI to ask AI to write things because asking AI to paraphrase or improve the quality of a paragraph is good, but asking AI to write the entire paper for you, it's probably it's going to get checked, and you may get a rejection by a journal that does not accept that. Or you may end up getting hallucinations. You may end up AI writing things that do not exist or are not true. So AI is improving and is doing a lot of things. AI could do analysis like the analysis that PLS does, but currently it does not. It does not do all the things that PLS does. And I think AI hallucinates a lot for certain things. So I tend to use AI in a limited way, but AI is pretty good at give you pointers, right? So what is the theory that you should use here? And then you go and do your own work. It doesn't do all the work for you. It doesn't make it so much faster than before, but I think it's very helpful. So that would be my recommendation for writing a paper. Any questions on this? So just close out of here. Okay, now I talked about multi-level analysis. This is very good. Let me move on. Well, let me see if there is anything that I missed. We have a hard deadline here to end this workshop at 5. So let me go through these. So yeah, I covered multi-level control results. I covered using categorical variables in SEM. But one thing that I wanted to cover in this particular area is what do you do if you have a categorical variable that actually is not something you want to control for, but you think that the variable is actually a missing variable that is categorical. So let's say I had a categorical variable that was t. Let's say I had a variable with 3 categories that reflected t, and I didn't have t. So let me tell you how to include that in the model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up here. So I'll delete the arrow terms because I don't need them anyways. And then what I'm going to do, unfortunately, all of this will get a bit messed up. No, I can leave this. This is irrelevant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to order this data set. I'll go to data. And I will choose this option, sort. I will sort it based on T. Smallest to largest. Okay, so now I have the variables are still random, but it may look like it's not random, but it's still that random. But the entire data set now is sorted by T. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a categorical variable for T. And it will be low for, let's say, from 1 to 3. Yeah, actually 1 to 2, right? Since I have a scale from 1 to 7. From 1 to 2, it will be low use. From 3 to 4, it will be medium. 3, 4, 5. No, 3 to 5 will be medium use. And high for 6 to 7. It's the rest. Where is this? Where did this come from? Okay, I'll just end here. So there was a missing. I'll just delete it. I'm deleting this because I'm going to read all of this again. So I just ordered the entire data set by T. And now what will happen is I'll just delete T. So that's what I have. So my theory tells me that T belongs there in the model, but I don't have T. What I have is this categorical variable that is T. And I will put it together with my categorical data because I don't want it here. So just put it here. Okay. So do you understand? Can you understand what I did here? I created a categorical variable that is highly correlated with T. But there's a lot of data missing, right? Because T was 1 to 7. This categorical variable is just 3 values. By the way, if I had only 2 categories, low and high, I would not need to do this procedure that I will show you right now, because I would just dummy code data 0 and 1. 0 for low and 1 for high. But since I have 3 categories, I need to use that procedure. So you understand what I'm doing here, right? Yes? So you understand what I'm doing? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And yeah, and one thing that happened here, I'll just delete the others because I deleted 1 row. So I just delete the others. I'm not going to use them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just reread this data into Warp PLS. So I'll just go back to step 2, which is read data from clipboard. Then I will just I'll pre-process the data. And this is a very powerful feature, so we may have to end up here, but it is a very powerful feature that I wanted to illustrate. So now we have M. And we have P. And we have nothing else. Now, so what happened? T was supposed to be here, but T is missing. So let me just save this model. And I will run my analysis without a model, just to have the latent variable scores there. And then what I will do is I will read that label, that categorical variable into our PLS. Add data labels from clipboard. And now I will do this. I will go, so I read my data labels, okay. So what I will do now is I will go to Explore, Categorical, Numeric Categorical Conversion, Categorical to Numeric. I'll choose Categorical Variable. And as my anchor, I could actually use the 2 of them because T was also part of a moderating relationship. But I will use just P. And typically what I will do is I have to use my anchors, the variables that are connected to that missing variable in the model. And how do I know that? Theory. So you have to have good theory always to do analysis, right? That's a very important message as well. You have to have good theory. Otherwise, depending on your theory, you're going to get different results, right? Because your model will be built differently. But my theory tells me that there is a variable here, T, user technology, that influences job performance. And so I'll choose as my anchor variable P, sign is positive. When you have only one anchor is, you can leave positive. It will just be, the variable will be created and vary together with that other variable. And here I can keep fixed variation, but normally I would use variation sharing. So when I want to include the variable in the model, not for a multi-level control, but inside the model, on that left part of the model that describes the theory, the structural model, then I use anchor factorial with variation sharing. So now what I do, I go to the SEM model, create latent variable. I'll use this indicator instead of T. Instead of T. So save. Now I will create my direct links. I'll perform my results, and you see they are very close to the results that I had before. And in fact, I'll go one step further, and I will include the moderating link. And let's see what I get here. It is very close to the 0.14 that I had before. So as you can see, this is a very powerful feature. Now, if you wanted to see the scores that were calculated for T, you can go to the graphs and then look at this one here that has T as the predictor and P as the criterion. So go to the option View Relationship Graphs with Data Points and Legends, and you can use unstandardized scales, multivariate to variate. Here, it's not really relevant. So multivariate graphs, they're going to be a bit different than bivariate graphs when there are multiple variables pointing at one variable. But in this particular case, I have only one variable of interest, but I'll use, there's only one control variable. I'll use bivariate. So, and here I'll choose the option data label to be shown. I will use that variable legend box. I'll choose categorical T. And then I get my scores. So here I have high, low, and medium. And as you can see, high is here. No, high is here. I'm sorry. High is here. Low is here, right? Low is the red one. And medium is here. And as you can see, they are not equidistant from one another. This is why this feature is so powerful. It really calculates the numeric scores that will be replacements for your categories in a scale that is not an interval scale, which people would do if they were dummy coding them. Let's assume that people knew that one was lower than the other and so on, then they would enter like 1, 2, and 3. That would mess up your path coefficients. So this feature is a very powerful feature of the software that very few software tools have, and that allow you to use categorical variables in your analysis. And you can have a messy data set with a lot of columns with categorical variables. You can include them, but you also need numeric variables to create the categorical variables, right? Because you need anchor variables. So that I think is a very powerful feature that is worth illustrating. So I guess there is, well, let me just take questions now. Any questions you'd like to ask before we conclude the workshop? Let me show my face again.
So, Dr. Koch, you mentioned about AI. How is it affecting too much work PLS and the analysis it conducts AI, or not yet, or to some extent?
Can you see my face now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was, well, AI will not currently do analysis like the analysis done by WordPLS. And I suspect that in the future, it may, but it will probably charge you. I mean, a lot of the features that we are using today, they're the most valuable features. They're probably going to be, they're going to come with a subscription. And I don't know how expensive that will be. But there is another thing. For you to be able to monitor what AI is doing, you have to know how to do it yourself. Like that model-driven data analytics course, you could argue, yeah, AI will do that, so why students should learn data analytics, right? Because the students will most likely, if they use AI, they will have to interpret what the AI is doing and monitor and do quality control on AI and be able to explain what AI did. And it's not going to be possible if they don't know how to do it themselves. It's like engineering with, engineering with programs that we do. We use programs like Autodesk to do very complex civil engineering calculations, but we also know how they are done. And so that's something that is important to do. By the way, I think you're changing the what is the name, grayscale or something like that for your image. I don't know. You're almost disappearing there. Oh yeah, I don't know why.
I don't know
But
what's
He's
happening.
playing with his background.
yeah, he was playing with his background. Now, another thing that is happening is that myself, and I'm sure several of you are using AI a lot for reporting, right? Standard reporting. And one thing that is starting to happen here, and I think I also heard in other places, is that when somebody asks you to do something and you do something using AI and you use that, the people that ask you to do that, they don't like it because they can get the same results with AI. In some cases, identical results. So if it looks too much like AI generated, it loses value in the eyes of the person that was expecting you to do it. Now you can use AI to do reporting, but you can use AI in a way that it doesn't have those things like, why is this important? You know, that itemization. If it's looking too much like AI, it will lose its value. That's my point. So that's something that I've been noticing also from editors and senior editors of journals. They've been talking about this. They don't like papers written with AI. They don't like AI doing too much for those papers. So they want most of the work to be done by the researchers. But yeah, AI is, we don't know, right? We don't know how AI will progress. By the way, AI tools that we have been using today, they employ neural networks, and the solution of neural networks is very similar to the solution of these structural SEM models. It's just that the final result is usually a label, and in the case of self-learning using large language databases, the labels are the next likely word or next likely next most probable sentence and so on. So if you had an AI agent or an AI tool to learn based on a large language database that is nonsense, you would give you nonsense. All of the conversation would be nonsense. So it's very interesting, which means essentially that AI, as it is today, it doesn't look like AI looks like it understands what it's saying. But what AI today is in fact a super sophisticated parrot, and it doesn't understand what it is saying in the way humans understand. Now, I suspect that the way it will go forward is that you will understand. You will reach the point where the level of sophistication will be so great that you will understand semantic knowledge. You will have semantic knowledge. But when it gets to that point, God help us, right? Because you will also understand that it can do a lot more than the creators who are essentially using it as a slave. So we're going to have like a Skynet scenario or something like that. I actually see that as a great opportunity for academics in certain areas like accounting, MIS, because you're going to need to audit AI creation and AI use. He's playing with his background.
No, I think
See,
is a sound light that is going directly to
oh,
the camera, and when I
Right.
cover
Yeah. If you cover, yeah,
yeah,
it
no
changes.
problem. Yeah.
but I
I
guess
don't
AI
know.
will I'm sorry. I think AI will be working like any other technology in which, for us not to be replaced, we would need to find other skills. We would need to develop other skills because technology is taking our place. So we need to find something else to do at a higher level. I would like to believe.
Exactly. So we'll have to learn how to use AI to do things, right? Another thing, AI for code writing, yeah, it does help. But for writing an entire WordPLS, I think it's far from doing something like that. Um, so it's far, that level of development is far into the future. But I can see it getting to a point a few years from now, maybe not a few years, maybe less so, where you say develop WordPLS, do these analysis, delete WordPLS, and then you get the results and write the paper. I can see that possibly happening. But I don't know. I don't know how we're gonna be dealing with that as a society. Uh, we have to be employed. We have to have an economy, but we cannot have technology do everything that we do, and then we sprint money to. I don't think that. I think work and an economy is needed for society to function. I don't think we can live in a society where nobody works, only the machines.
Yes, I don't think that is possible just yet.
It creates, I mean, then we don't have an economy, right? People need gainful employment to consume products that then create jobs for other people and so on. But anyways, we reached the deadline, the end of the workshop. Thank you all. I will end the meeting now. And then this will be recorded. I assume it will be made available to you soon. I will also make that those materials available to you as well.
Thank you, Dr. Koch.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Bye.